It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
If you're a die-hard hockey fan who likes to follow the future of the NHL before they blossom into stars, then do we have a show for you. Check out Locked On NHL Prospects, your daily podcast covering the next generation of hockey superstars leading up to the NHL Draft, with your host Hattie Kalakash, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.
Happy hump day, everybody, and welcome back to your source for fantasy hockey news. It is the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Today, another jam-packed episode, and one you're going to want to keep your eyes and ears glued to. We're taking a look at second half breakout candidates, some guys that have had whole slow starts that are going to come on strong in this second half. You know we got big-time bets and all the fantasy news in between that you need. Let's get right to it.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. It's the Wednesday edition, an edition which we are taking a look at the top breakout candidates for the second half of the NHL season. We got big-time bets on the way, but this is a spicy conversation, Steele, one that I'm excited to have with you because you and I know better than most that pegging some of these guys that maybe had slowish starts to the season, and you can jump on them in the second half and really benefit from that bounce back in the second half of the season, that can make or break your season. So we're looking at some guys that might be worth targeting in a trade, might be worth taking a risk on now that they have start to come back a little bit here, Steele. I'm intrigued to see who your top five guys are. We're not doing this in any order. This is just the five biggest players that we have pegged for a breakout in the second half. I don't want to waste any more time here, Steele, because this is a short and sweet episode. Who are you looking at? Hit me with one of these guys because, as always, I'm excited to hear who you have on your list.
Yeah, you know what? I'll start off with a defenseman that you actually pegged early on and predicted perfectly up to this point in Devon Toews with the Colorado Avalanche, a guy that you really did hit on the nail there, saying that he would regress a little bit this season, and he had a pretty slow start in the first half of the year. With the Colorado Avalanche, 20 points in 34 games compared to last year where he had 32 points in 32 games. So clearly a big regression for Devon Toews. And for me personally, I have him on a couple of fantasy teams, and he's been a little bit slow on the defensive side. But again, this is a guy that struggles when he doesn't have the talent around him. And he really hasn't had the amount of talent around him this season for the Colorado Avalanche. You know, looking at the stats, in the games played, MacKinnon's only played 25 games. Rodriguez, 26 games. Nichushkin, 15. Manson, 21. Byram, 10. And Landeskog, 0. He hasn't had the talent around him to really succeed and get those offensive stats that we saw last year. And look, he's only been in the league for 5 years, and every single year he's gotten better. First year, 18 points, then 28, then 31, then 57, and now he's had a slow year with the Colorado Avalanche. I expect as the returning players come back into the lineup, you know, MacKinnon's back now, Landeskog back hopefully soon. Who knows with Byram and Nichushkin, but once that talent gets back in the lineup, I think his stats should pick up in the second half of the season.
Most definitely. That's a really interesting point to make. I'm going to mention a Colorado Avalanche player, Steele. Look, the way I have this list broken down, there are a lot of ways you can go with these. I looked at this with a bit more of an elite level angle. Some guys that I really did expect to do better. Are they having okay seasons? Yes, so far. But they were so good last season, and I think they're going to be better in the second half. Devon Toews, thank you for mentioning that I had him pegged for a bit of a regression state. Those injuries played a lot into it. You hit the nail on the head there. Let me get to a goalie first on my list. Jacob Markstrom, 12-9-0, 2.78 goals against. He's not even at the 900 mark for save percentage. This goaltender can be better. The Calgary Flames overall, you could peg a bunch of guys. Oh, wait, I have another guy on my list that could be better in the second half. And it's, if you don't mind, I'll get right to it very quickly. It's Jonathan Huberdeau. This Calgary Flames team overall needs to be better. I mentioned Markstrom. I think he's going to get a lot of run out. You and I had a look at Vladar. You know Sutter wants to run this goaltender and Markstrom out there every night. He should be taking a lion's share of the games down the stretch. I think both him and Huberdeau are going to be better. I don't know if you have Huberdeau on your list, Steele, but 7 goals and 18 assists for a guy that last year was up there with 85 assists and 115 points. Yeah. He needs to be a lot better, and I think this entire Calgary Flames group is in for a much better second half.
Yeah, they really have to if they want to remain in a playoff spot as well. And Markstrom's a big part of that. Obviously, him battling out with Daniel Vladar right now for the starting number 1 job for the Calgary Flames. I think they're going to have to go with the better goalie at the time. So if it's Vladar, it's Vladar. But I do expect Markstrom to have a better second half. Huberdeau, I still think it's a work in progress. The chemistry's not there a little bit. We'll have to wait and see what he does the second half. But I really hope he does succeed a little bit more than what he's shown so far. I have a couple goalies on my list as well, but I'll get to them. I'll get to them later in this episode. I want to get over to Patrick Kane of the Chicago Blackhawks, and for me personally, his success and future success really depends on if he gets traded to a cup contending team. Yeah. We know that he has no talent around him right now on the Chicago Blackhawks. 27 points in 36 games this year. It's not bad, but for his standards, it is. Last year, he had 96 points, very quiet 96 point last year with the Chicago Blackhawks. The shooting percentage is awful this year. He's getting a ton of shots on net and opportunities, just not finding the back of the net whatsoever. But again, I go to the fact of having no talent around him. This guy, this stud of a player, so much talent in him. He went from playing with Artemi Panarin down to Alex DeBrincat, down to Max Domi and Tyler Johnson. That is some very bad regression of talent surrounding, beside him on the top line. So that is clearly going to affect his production rate as well. Again, Patrick Kane, if he gets traded to a cup contending team, especially for a keeper league, we're going to see some succession in the second half of the season leading into next year as well.
Most definitely, Steele. He was right there at the top of my list. I'm glad that you are talking about him because he didn't make my list. He's on my honorable mentions for all of the reasons that you just said. And look, we have been on this topic now for over a season. Patrick Kane is likely not going to be a member of the Chicago Blackhawks come trade deadline time. And that means you got to keep your eye on this situation. If he goes to the Rangers or any cup contender, his value goes through the roof, and we know this player can still get it done. Magic hands and a lot of talent. Where the magic lies for making your bets, it's at betonline.net, because today's episode is brought to you by betonline.net, your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis this season and every season. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From pro football to college bowl season, which is wrapping up, to the NBA hardcourt and everything in between, they have you covered at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, just like you love this one, you can find even more of those over at betonline.net as well, where there are always the fastest and easiest way for you to get all of your betting info. Just like Steele and I, we get our nightly lines for all of our NHL boards at BetOnline. You can head to the website today or use the mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts.
If you're a die-hard hockey fan who likes to follow the future of the NHL before they blossom into stars, then do we have a show for you. Check out Locked On NHL Prospects, your daily podcast covering the next generation of hockey superstars leading up to the NHL Draft, with your host Hattie Kalakash, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.
Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. For your next listen, though, go check out Locked On NHL Prospects, your daily podcast covering the next generation of hockey superstars leading all the way up to the NHL Draft this summer, plus NHL Draft rankings and comparisons for top prospects on every single team. Locked On NHL Prospects, available on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform, just like this podcast right here. So make sure you hit the subscribe, hit the follow button. Flip and I appreciate all the love and support. Thank you so much. Don't be afraid to leave us comments on the YouTube channel. DM us on our Twitter, LO_FantasyNHL. We appreciate the communication and connection with all of you listeners out there. And Flip, let's get back to the conversation. Players who hopefully, or you and I think, will have a better second half of the season so far, starting 2023 in the new year. I'd like to kick it off with Filip Forsberg, Nashville Predators.
Please do.
I think we already saw a big turning point for Filip Forsberg and the Nashville Predators this past weekend. I already talked about it a couple of episodes ago, or even last episode, where they got 3 out of 4 points on 2-game road trip. Forsberg had 6 points in 2 games and a hat trick against the Vegas Golden Knights. I really do think this is a turning point for both Forsberg and the Predators. You know me, I had them very high on my list. Top 3 team, actually, finishing in the regular season. I thought they were going to be extremely deadly. Obviously started very slow for a lot of guys on the team. More specifically, UC Saros, Forsberg, and Duchesne, obviously all having career years last year. But we can expect them to be better the second half. You even said it multiple times that the Nashville Predators are notoriously bad starters and pick it up tremendously in the second half of the season. So that's what I think for the Nashville Predators and Forsberg.
Hey, and you could have, I think, done this with any player on that top line, Steele. I looked at Matt Duchene as a candidate for a second half resurgence. Look, he only, speaking of Matt Duchene, only 10 goals this season after I believe he had 40 plus last season. So I think 10 goals, 17 assists for Matt Duchene. That entire top line could be second half breakthrough candidates, in my opinion. So thank you for mentioning a Nashville Predator for the exact reasons that you just said. This team comes on strong in the second half almost every season. So keep your eye on that top line in Nashville for sure. All of these players that Steele and I are mentioning, likely hard to just go out there and add on the waiver wire. So make sure you're considering these players in some trades. Go out there and take a shot. If you missed the trade special episode, hit the YouTube channel. This is the time of year to be making some trades, Steele. Now, Aleksander Barkov has been injured, right? Has been back and now coming on strong since his return from injury. Yes, he's gone pointless in the last 2, but I think this player, after looking at his numbers last year, Steele, 39 goals and 49 assists in 67 games, this guy is going to explode in the second half, in my opinion. Carter Verhaeghe and Matthew Tkachuk with Barkov in the middle is one of the more, maybe it's not even underrated. So it's one of the best fantasy lines out there. Carter Verhaeghe, definitely underrated. I think Barkov is going to go off in the second half. And look, say what you want to say about this Florida Panthers squad, because they have not been very good. That top line is continuing to get it done and really carrying this team. I think Barkov going to go off this second half. Big time breakout candidate.
I love the fact you're going over to the Florida Panthers, because that's actually where my last 2 players are on this Panthers team.
Here we go.
I'm looking at Aaron Ekblad on the blue line. Nice. He has been horrendous. Actually, another defenseman that you called out on me picking a little bit early in our draft. Didn't really expect to do this, and you hit the nail on the head once again with this defenseman.
Appreciate that.
14 points in 27 games this year. Yes, he's struggled with injuries every single year, it seems like. That just comes with the cost of, drafting Aaron Ekblad. Usually it works out okay. Even last year he was injured, but he still had 57 points in 61 games. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But again, 14 points in 27 games this year. He's a minus 15 on the season. And as of right now, he actually has more penalty minutes in 27 games than he had last year in 61. So he is hurting his team a lot when he's on the ice, whether it's penalty minutes or just not playing great defensively. Again, 14 points is not great for a guy who really does jump up in the play, can be a power play juggernaut and quarterbacks that top power play unit when he is on. He has 2 points in his last 11 games. It's not good enough. And again, you mentioned it. If the Florida Panthers want any chance of making the postseason and making even a deep playoff run, Aaron Ekblad, Aleksander Barkov, they need to have better second halves of the season. And those are 2 players that I like the fact that you mentioned Barkov. And I'll get to my last players when after you mention yours.
Hey, the Ottawa Senators starting to play a bit better. Buffalo Sabres a lot better this season. Detroit Red Wings playing a lot better this season. That leaves the Florida Panthers on the outside looking in this Atlantic division, because we know at the top it's Boston, Toronto, and Tampa, and the rest to pick up the scraps. They are on the outs. They're 11 points out of that wild card spot right now, Steele. Actually, out of the 3rd spot. This is going to be a very tough second half, and if they're going to want any sniffs around it, like you said, Barkov, Ekblad, these guys are going to need to really step up. Let's see if they can do it. I don't think they can, personally, in terms of the success in the standings. But fantasy-wise, I think these pieces are big time going to break out. Look, I got 2 guys left, Steele. And these 2 guys are going to come on here. I'm going to say these times about coming up breakouts. These 2 guys are nasty, and they have had pretty good starts. This is just how good I think they really can be. Number 1, Nathan MacKinnon. We know he was injured.
Yeah.
We know going into the break, his injury break, 9 goals in 25 games. He still got 36 points in 25 games this season, Steele. But that's how good this player is. Nathan MacKinnon is going to go off. If they can get healthy, you mentioned as this Colorado team maybe needs some more respect on its name. Still the Stanley Cup champion. Let's see what they can do as they continue to get healthy. Nathan MacKinnon, in my opinion, right there at the top of breakout candidates for the second half. 9 goals in 25 games. We know he can be so much better than that, Steele. And when I look at my last guy, Sebastian Aho, 12 goals, 18 assists, 30 points in 30 games. What more do you want from him? When Max Pacioretty comes back to this lineup, it's going to do big things for the balance and the veteran presence on this young Hurricanes team that, like you said yesterday, it's one weakness. What is it, 17th in the league in goals for this season? They need to score more. I think Sebastian Aho is going to light the lamp with regularity in the second half. He is my number 1 breakout candidate. We didn't rank these by 1 to 5, but if I were to put a guy at the top, Sebastian Aho, 12 goals in 30 games. This kid's going to go off in the second half. Steele, big part. Pacioretty back in the lineup.
I like the fact you mentioned Nathan MacKinnon. And, I was looking at, again, even when I was looking at Devon Toews and all the stats, Mikko Rantanen leading the team in points right now, 47 points on the season. But Nathan MacKinnon having 36 points in 25 games, the fact that he's never hit the 100-point marker in his entire career is outstanding to me. It's unbelievable because it seems like he's always there with the top guys every single season. Again, it's just a matter of fact of him staying healthy and being able to play more than 75 games. If he plays more than 75 games, no question he hits more than 100 points. My last set of players come from the same team. It's a tandem of goalies, again, from the Florida Panthers, Sergei Bobrovsky and Spencer Knight. This team is not going to go, even if Ekblad and Barkov can have successful seasons in the second half this year, the Florida Panthers aren't going anywhere unless Spencer Knight and Sergei Bobrovsky pick up the slack that they've been lacking in the first half. 8-6-3 for Spencer Knight, 3 goals against average and a .907 save percentage. 8-12-1 for Bobrovsky with a 3.32 goals against average and an .894 save percentage. At this point, I don't care who's in the crease, but you can't continuously switch them out every single time they lose a game. That's what I've been seeing the last 2 weeks. Knight loses, Bobrovsky's in the next game. Bobrovsky loses, Knight's in the next game. Let one of them just continue to get a little bit more confidence and play some more minutes. Like they each played, Knight's played 18 games and Bobrovsky's played 22. Like you don't normally see that between 2 goalies in the league right now. It's becoming more common, but it's not working out. Give one of them the starting job and let them run with it and see what they can do. That's my take anyway for the Florida Panthers if they want any chance on making the postseason.
Yeah, and like I just mentioned, just so many good teams on top of them. I think, though, with that line that I mentioned, they are good enough to hang in this division, especially on the wild card bubble. Look, they've put themselves behind the 8 ball. It's going to be a tough second half. I think all of the fantasy pieces we mentioned on the Panthers have big-time second halves. Is it going to be enough for them to get over the hump in that Atlantic division? It's going to come down to the goaltending. You can't help but feel, too, Steele, that you mentioned the tandem and what's going on with their playing amounts, with how much money Sergei Bobrovsky is continuing to make, that you can't help but feel that front office needs him to play at least 50% of the games. Whereas, why do you even care if you're not winning? Let Spencer Knight take the crease if Bobrovsky can't do it, or give Bob the full run out if Spencer Knight can't get it done either. That's one of those frustrating things too, Steele. If you own either of those goalies, that can get very frustrating. You might have to jump ship on one of those guys if Steele's prediction doesn't come to fruition over these next few weeks. There is a lot of spicy hockey content on the way over the next couple of weeks, Steele, while we hit that halfway mark in the NHL. We got big-time bets coming up for Wednesday's board. Let's get right to it in 1 second.
Yeah, you and I are starting off 2023 on a great note, going 2 for 3 or 3 for 3 the other night. Boston and Penguins hitting the under for you. And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Don't forget, we are free and available on all podcast platforms, including YouTube. Make sure you go hit the subscribe, hit the follow button. We appreciate all the love and support. We're making our way to 800 subscriptions on YouTube right now. So help us out. We appreciate it. With that being said, let's return the favor, Flip. Hopefully we're helping some people out there make some money where the money is made. Big time bets, people. Flip, kick us off because you're starting 2023 on the right note.
Appreciate that. I'm looking at a little home dog spot here. The New Jersey Devils have been one of the best road teams in the league this year. And have I given them some credit? Yes. But look, they're 2-9 in their last 11 games, and they're starting to come back down to earth a little bit. New Jersey also struggles on the road when they play Detroit. 6 wins out of their last 20 trips to D-Train. This just feels like a tough spot for the Devils. The Red Wings have been a little bit up and down, but they play great at home against these Devils. This just feels like a good spot also. Red Wings at home, plus 125 right now on the money line. Loving the plus money for a home dog steal. Ville Husso is the real deal in Detroit. They have a goalie. Let's see what the Red Wings can do in the second half. They're in the mix for a wild card spot in this division. Give me the Red Wings on the money line. Good home spot, good odds. Give me a Ville Husso big-time game tonight.
I like Ville Husso. I like the trend there, too. Devils not playing great against the Red Wings on the road, so I might have to sprinkle some on the home dogs over there. I've actually got a flip triple dip for Wednesday's board.
Go off.
I'm looking at that Dallas Stars Anaheim Ducks game.
Of course.
Look, this is the second of a back-to-back for the Dallas Stars, so it might be a little bit risky with some of these picks, but nonetheless, I have full faith in Scott Wedgwood or whoever's in the crease against these Ducks. So I'm taking my first pick of the night. I'm just gonna rattle all three off right now. I'm taking the Stars on the puck line against these Ducks. 4 of their last 6 games, the Ducks have lost by 3 or more goals. So they're getting absolutely obliterated, it seems like, this entire season. One of the worst teams. Everyone knows that. Stars on the puck line. We'll get the odds out to you before the game later today.
Yes, we will.
I'm also taking the over 6 goals at minus 114. 6 out of the 6 last games for the Ducks, or 5 out of the 6 last games for the Ducks, have gone over the number. Again, they've been absolutely obliterated and dominated in every sense that you could think of. Over 6 goals, minus 114. I'm also, for my lock of the night, I'm taking Jason Robertson over 1.5 points in this contest. This kid is the real deal. He is the fire that ignites this Dallas Stars team right there, along with Jake Ottinger in the crease. Got to go with the young gun, Robertson, over 1.5 points for my lock of the night.
Absolutely love it, Steele. Look, this Anaheim Ducks team is straight up and down awful. I don't even know why I was liking them at home the other night against the Philadelphia Flyers. They just got embarrassed again, and they lose so many games by more than 1 or 2 goals. It's like it's not just a 1 or 2, it's 3 or 4 seemingly almost every single night. I'm going to get to the Stars in 1 second. Tampa Bay at Minnesota, Steele. I know you're going to be watching this one. This is a quiet 3-game board. You're going to be paying attention to this game. It is the toast of the action tonight. Look, the last 2 games between these two teams produced 16 total goals. To me, when I looked at this one, I wanted to bet the under at first, and then I thought about it for a second. This feels like a 4-3, even 5-4 final.
Yeah.
Look, the Tampa Bay Lightning are coming off a 5-3 performance against Arizona, well over the number. The Minnesota Wild, 5 spot against the St. Louis Blues, that was over the number. This one goes over the number as well, Steele, over 6.5. That's my second pick. Thank you for teeing up the Dallas Stars as nicely as you did. There's only so many places we can go tonight, and I don't like to bet the puck line very often. I said what I said about the Dallas Stars is a very good, underrated dark horse cup pick. Good odds right now as well, Steele. Do we think they're going to go all the way to the cup? I don't know, but I know Jake Ottinger is good enough. I know Miro Heiskanen's good enough, and I know that top line is as good as any in the NHL, and that right there, good enough to go on a run. Give me the Stars as my lock of the night on the puck line as well, Steele. This Anaheim team is just so bad. I'm going to, just like the Columbus Blue Jackets, I'm going to fade them all second half long, and if I lose a couple in the process, that's okay, but something tells me they're going to be losing a lot more games in the second half, just like the first half.
Yeah, it's a battle for Connor Bedard right now between the Blue Jackets, Ducks, Blackhawks.
Yep.
Look, they clearly want him really, really bad. So let's see what happens. But you're right. Stars on the puck line. Absolutely love it. You're right there along with me for Wednesday's board of games, 3-game board. thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Hopefully, Flip and I are doing you guys some justice, making some money on the new year, 2023. Make sure you go check out Locked On NHL Prospects, your daily podcast covering the next generation of hockey superstars leading up to the NHL draft this summer, as well the NHL draft rankings and top prospects and comparisons for every single team. Locked On NHL Prospects, your daily podcast, available on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform, just like this one right here. Hit the subscribe, hit the follow button. Flip and I appreciate all the love and support. Have a great day. Good luck with all your bets out there, and we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.
This is Locked On NHL Prospects, a podcast brought to you 5 days a week where I break down all the latest happenings in the scouting world. I'm Hadi Kalikesh. I'm a scout and prospect analyst across multiple platforms. And if you want to know what makes Connor Bedard so special, if you want to know who your team should pick at the 2023 NHL Draft, or if you just want to know what's happening at the World Juniors, look no further. I've got you covered. You can find us on YouTube or anywhere you get your podcasts, so give us a follow and we'll make sure you're the most informed person at your water cooler when it comes to NHL prospects. Brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.